Thank you very much, friends and long-time friends and new friends. For those that I'm meeting anew, for those I haven't met before, I'm Martin Betts. I'm the CEO of an organisation called Hedex in Australia. Aleks and I knew each other as fellow deans of engineering in technological universities in Australia from 21 years ago. And it's a real delight to do a double act with Aleks. We've done a few over the years.
We have done. We're still trying.
And I'm really looking forward to doing that and going from that to have the next panel with the friends that are down in this front row here. But before we bring the conversation back into the room, we're going to take the conversation around the world just to get us all out a bit and exercised and spreading our wings. And I'm really hoping that fresh off a red eye from Arizona State University, we've had a few mentions of that already today, is my good friend Ann Kirschner, who's an advisor. Oh, look at that. You are so well timed, Ann.
Hello, Ann.
This is Aleks.
Welcome to Aston in Birmingham.
Thank you very much.
Ann, as I said, is a special advisor to Michael Crow. That name's come up many times today in Arizona State University. She's served on the board of EdPlus, the online delivery platform at Arizona State University with its 100,000 or so students. Ann might correct me on the numbers. And until recently, she was the interim president of Hunter College in the City University of New York. And your history with some of those things that I'm mentioning goes back a bit further than that. We heard reference to Michael Crow being the provost of Columbia just before the break, and I think it was while you were both at Columbia that you set up one of the very first global edtech companies. And you've been guiding an awful lot of edtech companies in online education around the world ever since then. But we're really interested in having a conversation with you that draws on your edtech leadership experience, your recent reflections on being a university president at the most interesting of times, and the connection.
Interesting. We might use other words for it in addition to interesting.
Well, I'll let you describe it exactly as you want, but Aleks and I have got a couple of questions each that we want to ask you over the next 15, 20 minutes or so. And my good friend Aleks gets to ask the first question, Ann, so over to him.
And I've been given a privilege to kick off this fireside chat. Are you okay with that?
Lovely, thank you.
I might start with something that's really fresh in my mind. And this morning, our colleague from Arizona State University has brought this to our attention as well. There's an article that came out this week in the New York Times. It's titled, "Voters to Elites, Do You See Us Now?" And we had a really engaging discussion this morning around the general societies, communities, seeing universities maybe as part of the elites. Over the years in US, I know I've seen this in UK, so it's coming. There is a view of universities that perhaps they are disconnected, they're not that connected to the community and for the common good, that they are perhaps a little bit elitist, that their role is being questioned, the funding for what they do is being questioned, whether it's value for money. It is a time of questioning and challenging. And the key topic of our forum here, as you know, and the Coalition of the Willing here, that's really engaged with this topic because they truly, I would say, walk the talk, has a different view. We are focused on the University 4.0, that next generation university that is actually adopting that quadruple model, quadruple helix model that involves deep partnership with engagement, government, society, and university. What is your view about this? It is a complex agenda. What is happening? How do we collectively as a sector regain the trust of community and society? And how do we truly demonstrate our value and our worth?
That's it's a complicated question, and I'll start by affirming the negative side of the equation, and some of what I'll say is going to seem perhaps U.S. centric, and also I'm painting with a broad brush. So while what I'm going to say is not true of all universities, it's certainly true of many. This is a time of real and serious challenges. Many institutions are finding that their enrollments are down. And certainly everything you read it indicates that there is serious public disillusionment with the cost and the value of a degree. We've also had a year of a lot of negative public attention over campus protesters. In the States, we had a terribly difficult year on student debt and financial aid, new procedures. And of course, it comes at a time when resources are ever more scarce, and when we live in a time of rapid change and disruption. You think about Clay Christensen's Innovator's Dilemma, the notion of creative destruction when new competitors challenge existing businesses, when consumer demands change. And then AI enters the picture and raises that question of how do we do things not only less expensively, but more personalized and perhaps even better for students. And, it's hard to talk about this in the States without saying we don't know what comes next. But as of this week, we are likely to hear amplified concerns about the value of post-secondary education, and perhaps even greater public concern about campus culture. So, so first I would affirm that, yes, we face renewed challenges to define how we are agents of positive social impact. And we have to rethink how we can be timely and responsive to this moment. I guess I would go one step further and talk a little bit about the public good of post-secondary education. We are the home of scholarship and research. We are the place for deep knowledge. That's our DNA, and we educate the next generation of scientists and humanists and inventors and prepare them for their place in the world. And I know well from your perspective at your institution that we have also been historically the seat of innovation that does address the most pressing needs of society. So that notion of socioeconomic transformation, that is our birthright to own. But in this time of challenges, we really have to evolve, and that's not just a nice to have, an opportunity, but I believe it's really an imperative, because time is not on our side. COVID was one kind of epidemic. This is another one that has the potential to sap public trust, to weaken philanthropy, to weaken public support, all because of concern about the value of higher ed. I'll add just one thing, because you brought up what can we do, and I do think that there are skills that maybe weren't so important before for leaders in higher ed that are becoming absolutely imperative now. And the first of that is re-engineering how we serve students, how we advance the careers of our faculty, just doing things in new ways. We have to move more quickly. We have to be more nimble. Our students are now learning in new ways, and we have to be prepared to teach and to run our institutions in new ways. And one key way to do that is really to build partnerships with the private sector. And I know that that's something that a lot of people in this room are beginning to do. I noted that Adobe and AWS are both partners for your conference. We have to have new partnerships. And one of the reasons is to make sure that we align students with the workplace that they will enter. But it's also important for faculty, because the world of scholarship and research is also changing very much. So that's a very long answer to your question, but you asked kind of the biggest question of all, which is, what's the state of play today and what can we do about it?
I appreciate it. It's really, really a complex issue, and I think you provided a great answer. My colleague, Martin, shared with me one insight recently from his chat in Brisbane, and he said, perhaps universities should talk less about what they're good at, but more about what they're good for. And I think that sums up a lot, I think, in that statement. So moving on to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alex. And thanks, Anne, for setting us off there with some wise words about the challenges that we're facing. And look, they're obvious to us all, aren't they? And becoming more obvious all of the time in the way and for the reasons that you've articulated. And they call upon us to change. I wonder, what's your sense with all of the multiple different involvements you've had with universities, most recently as a president of one yourself, an interim president of one yourself, of how well equipped universities are to enter into those partnerships that you say are so important? And you likened the current challenge to being like the challenge of COVID. And I know that previous occasions I've spoken to you, you've likened strong leadership to being like the vaccine, like the superpower that we'll need this time round. You might want to elaborate on what you mean by that, because my question is, how well equipped are our universities to be places in their place-based environments that can work well with companies? And how well equipped are leaders of our universities to exert the superpower that's needed to overcome the challenges that we're facing?
Again, it runs the spectrum from institutions that are very well prepared and already doing a great job at it, to institutions that are really struggling to even begin having those conversations. In business, there's always a department of new business development, and most institutions don't have that. One of the reasons why it was so exciting to join Michael Crow at Columbia way back in 1999 was that he and his colleagues had already inculcated this notion of how do we make the university more porous, more open to the outside world. And that means helping faculty to become more entrepreneurial, having a culture of tech transfer, helping faculty to think about how their research could be applied in the real world. And it's not simply that that's a great way for institutions to make money, although it is. It's also because it demonstrates that notion of transformation that universities have always been so good at, that things that initiate in the labs of institutions or in the papers of the humanists. I don't want to leave the humanists out of this conversation. This is how the world learns. I still don't see that many institutions have the sort of infrastructure to make those partnerships work. Often, I spent 25 years in business before coming back into higher education. And I think most of the people who knew me in business could never have imagined that I have a PhD in English literature, because they would have thought that was sort of strange. And many of the people I know in academics don't know that I have the business background, but because I have had a foot in both camps, if you will, I'm very in tune with the language. You don't want to put the language module of business out into the academic world, because it doesn't land right, and the other way around. You don't want to bring the language of academics into business. So to a large extent, we exist on different planets. Our sense of accountability is very different. Speed of execution. If you try to do a partnership with a company and they want to get a product into the marketplace or get some R&D underway, we are slow moving institutions. So I think our clock speed really needs to accelerate, and that's a tall order at many institutions.
And do you want to comment any further on the challenges for leadership in transforming that picture?
Well, maybe it'll sound self-serving, but I do think that leadership needs to be in tune with the diversity of interests that you serve. I think the one of the big takeaways for me from this year running a very large urban institution was how many decisions I had to make that had to do with real estate and public safety and partnerships with not only with companies but structuring relationships with philanthropists. Now, that wasn't all that difficult for me because of my background, but when we think about how many institutional leaders come up through very well-defined academic ranks, they may not have that background. And I know it was useful for me. And I would just suggest that as we look for our new generation of leaders, we make sure that, not that they need necessarily to come from those worlds, but that they understand it, that they don't look down on it, and that they understand how to harness the fuel of those partnerships to advance their stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Looking at your background, and I know I spoke with Martin a fair bit about your work in the past, and we were obviously both participating in the headX blogs as well. You were one of the early trailblazers in online education, and you've been very active in driving ventures in that area, providing thought leadership and embedding that in the operating model of universities. Clearly, the single model of single on-campus studies face-to-face is proving to be an outdated model and under increasing financial pressures. And I, like you, share a view that those financial pressures on those traditional models will grow and increase going over time. You've also spoke about the evolution of the omnichannel model that is obviously coming from the commercial world into the higher education model of delivery. We at Aston have embedded the omnichannel model in our 2030 strategy and advancing. I wanted to ask you, where do you see the future for online education, digital transformation in universities in general? And that's not just for education, and that diffusion, more rapid, more fundamental diffusion of digital innovation within universities, including evolution of the omnichannel model.
So let me explain this notion of omnichannel. Nike or Uniqlo or Chanel, they don't care where or how you buy their product. Netflix doesn't care whether you're watching on your phone or your computer or your tablet or your home TV. What they care about is, in addition to quality products, what they care about is the customer experience. They care about whether the customer is getting what they need, and how does that experience reinforce the sense of value. Now, we don't like thinking of our students or any members of the academic community as our customers, but there is a way to translate that notion into higher ed. See, that's a good example of having the right language module in my head, and switching it away from the business and into the academic. So the notion of the omni-channel strategy is, how do we build a coherent, effective learner experience across devices and platforms and channels? And I would argue that the time has come to be platform agnostic. Whether you study online or in a classroom is not an ideological choice. It's a tactical decision, and it depends on who you are and how much time you have and what subjects you are studying, what your goals are. So for me, this is a moment where institutions should enable students to move freely from one learning modality to another. They should be able to not only stack their credentials, but be flexible about those learning formats depending on their needs and how they change. And we make it very difficult in general to move from one modality to another, even within the same institution. So providing that level of flexibility requires systemic change and culture change. So as long as our infrastructure is managed by different fiefdoms with competing agendas, and as long as we think that one kind of student and format, full-time and residential, is somehow to be elevated, advantaged against others, part-time and online, then I think it's going to be an impossible dream. But I do see progress in how we're moving in that area.
And just one more sub question before I hand over to Martin. Clearly, the evolution of AI is quite rapid, and it's touching every domain of our operations, work, study, and so on. Where do you see the future of AI in higher education?
Oh, I think AI is going to pour over the head of higher education, like a viscous fluid, and seep into every corner. It's going to affect the processes, the business processes of, everything from financial aid to registration for classes. It's going to change academic advising. It's going to change how we prepare students for careers. It's going to change how our faculty do research. And it is certainly already changing how our students learn. And so I think the changes are going to be profound. I got a chance to look at some of the cutting edge things that are being done at Arizona State when I was there just over the last couple of days. And it's enormously exciting, not as a replacement for the human enterprise of teaching and learning, but as an augmentation. And particularly, at a place like Hunter, you do have thousands of students for every one academic advisor. Well, how can you serve students, deeply and in a personal way with those sorts of ratios? But I think in the area of advising, I think we're going to see some very early wins as we deploy artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Ann.
Managing and helping with the evolution and the innovation with that lot, Anne, is going to be quite a challenge, isn't it? And I know that when you finished up being interim president at Hunter, you, before then charging off to Arizona again, you took a bit of time off and went to Japan to reflect and see what you could learn from a local context. And lo and behold, I saw you pop up with some writing about managing universities being like looking after bonsai. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? What's the analogy?
I found myself in Japan on vacation and was sitting with my husband and some friends in a bonsai studio. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that there was a lot for us to learn from how bonsais are created. It starts with a design, a creative vision. Then you remove the branches, cut them away that disrupt the shape that you're imagining. That's the pruning. And then comes the most interesting part, and that's the planning for permanence. And if you bend the branches just with your hands, they're going to break. And so the way you form a bonsai is you take a thin, flexible wire, wrap it around the branch, and then gently repositioning it so that it begins to grow in the direction that you want. And as it grows, you take off the thin wire, you replace it with thicker wire, and eventually the change becomes organic, and the wires disappear completely. So I was thinking about those three steps of vision, pruning, and permanence, and what they can offer us as we try to think about innovation in higher education. And everything starts with the vision. And are we differentiated? Is there something special about our institution? There really ought to be. And yet, if you read the mission statements of most institutions, they're kind of bland. They kind of are mostly the same. So if we believe we must change, I think it starts with that, with those big ideas. The second part is pruning. Once we have the vision, have we established priorities? Have we shut things down when they don't work? That's something that universities are not always good at. But it's important to do that since none of us have unlimited resources. We have to support the main areas of growth. And implicit in that is, who are the innovators on your campus? And are you supporting them? Where is your research and development, your skunk works, to borrow a term from engineering? To whom do you turn to try out something new? I think we're headed to an era where students have so much to teach us, particularly about AI. I'm going back into the classroom in the spring, and that's one of the things I'm going to say to the students is yes, use AI. Tell me how you're using it. And I expect that we will all learn from each other. That last step is the hardest, and it's building for permanence, but paradoxically, it's really building towards a culture of constant innovation, because the work is never done. If you want the tree to stay alive and keep growing, we have to do the equivalent of creating the systems that wrap and train our innovation branches as they grow. So the bonsai moment for me was vision, innovation, and change management are absolutely essential, as well as this awareness of how we can build for continual innovation.
And we've got a number of friends from Japan in the audience with us here that are nodding very vigorously. And we've got lots of other friends from all around the world who are just dying to go off and be bonsai practitioners, I think, from the inspiring words you've given us. So thank you so much for joining us from New York City. Thank you so much for making the trip into Aston and Birmingham to share your thoughts about the innovation agendas that we all face here.
Well, warm thanks for the invitation, Morten and Aleks. I hope to see you all in person sometime, and I hope the rest of the conference is terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anne. Please give her a round of applause. And thank you, Aleks, for joining us for that fireside chat. Always good to see you.
Thank you, Martin.